The triumph. The triumph was Rome's version of a victory parade, but not a casual one. A general who won a major war could request permission to ride through Rome in a golden chariot, dressed as Jupiter himself. The whole city showed up. Free food, prisoners in chains, soldiers chanting. It was spectacular. Here's the catch. A slave had to stand behind the general the entire time, whispering, "Remember, you are only a man." Rome basically invented the concept of "don't let it go to your head" and hired someone full-time to enforce it. The Sacramentum. This was the military oath every Roman soldier had to swear before touching a single weapon. He promised loyalty to Rome, to his commander, and to the gods all at once. It wasn't optional. It wasn't casual. It was legally and spiritually binding. Breaking it didn't just make you a deserter, it made you an enemy of the gods. Imagine your job contract, except if you quit without notice, Jupiter personally adds you to a list. The Vestal fire. 6 women called the Vestal virgins were given one job: keep the sacred fire burning. That's it. Just don't let it go out. If the fire died, Romans believed Rome would fall. The Vestals tended that flame for 30 years of their lives. 30 years. For a fire. In fairness, Rome lasted about 500 years, so statistically speaking, they were pretty good at their job. The auspices. Before any major decision, a war, an election, a treaty, Rome's leaders consulted augurs, priests who read the will of the gods through bird behavior. Specifically, they watched how chickens ate. Yes, chickens. If the sacred chickens ate enthusiastically, the gods approved. If the chickens refused to eat, the mission was off. One Roman admiral, famously frustrated before a naval battle, looked at his uncooperative chickens and said, "If they won't eat, let them drink." He threw them overboard. He lost the battle. Badly. The chickens were right. The LECTISTERNIUM. Whenever Rome was having a really bad time, plague, famine, military disasters, the priests organized a ritual feast. Not for the people, for the gods. Statues of the major deities were brought out, placed on cushioned couches, and served actual food. The idea was simple. The gods are clearly upset. Feed them. Make them comfortable. Rome basically apologized to its deities, the same way you'd apologize to a guest you forgot to invite to dinner. The LUPERCALIA. Every February, near-naked priests called LUPERCE ran through the streets of Rome hitting people with strips of goatskin. Women actually lined up to be struck, believing it would make them fertile. This was not a fringe event. This was a national holiday. Rome looked at the concept of wellness and said, what if we made it weirder and faster and involved more running? The census. Every 5 years, Rome counted every single citizen. Name, property, family, wealth, all recorded. This wasn't just paperwork. It was a sacred act, ended with a ritual called the lustrum, a purification sacrifice to cleanse the entire Roman people at once. Missed the census? You lost your citizenship. Lie on the census? You could be enslaved. Rome invented big government and made it religious, which honestly explains a lot about how it lasted so long. The PARENTALIA. For 9 days every February, Romans honored their dead ancestors. Temples closed. Weddings were banned. The city went quiet. Families visited graves, left offerings of wine, salt, and bread, and sat in silence with the dead. Rome didn't forget its ancestors. It built an entire holiday around remembering that everything you have came from someone who is gone. It was melancholy, respectful, and oddly Roman. Even grief had a schedule. The DEVOTIO. This one is extreme. If a Roman general felt his army was losing badly, he could perform the DEVOTIO, a ritual where he dedicated himself, the enemy, and the underworld gods to destruction, then charged alone into the enemy line to die. The idea was that his death would satisfy the gods of death so completely that Rome would win. It was the ultimate sacrifice. One general named Decius Mus did this. His son did it in the next war. His grandson did it in the war after that. The Decius family collectively decided that dying heroically was the family business. The SALUTATIO. Every single morning, powerful Romans held what was called a SALUTATIO, a formal greeting ritual where their clients, friends, and dependents lined up outside their house at dawn to pay respects. The more people at your door, the more powerful you were. Miss it? You were disrespecting your patron. Show up late? Social disaster. Rome essentially turned saying good morning into a competitive sport with career consequences. The Supplicatio. When Rome won a truly massive victory, the Senate could decree a Supplicatio, a public thanksgiving that could last anywhere from 3 days to 55 days. Citizens visited every temple in the city, offering prayers and small sacrifices. 55 days of thanksgiving. Rome once celebrated Julius Caesar's victories with a 55-day supplicatio. That's nearly 2 months of the entire city basically being on a national mood boost. Rome understood that armies need to win, but people need to feel the win. The Saturnalia. For 7 days every December, Rome flipped entirely upside down. Slaves were served dinner by their masters. Gambling, normally illegal, was allowed everywhere. Gifts were exchanged. Schools closed, courts shut down. The most powerful empire in the world basically said, you know what? Take a week. Everything is fine. Nothing matters. Masters didn't just tolerate this. They were expected to participate cheerfully. A grumpy master during Saturnalia was a social embarrassment. Rome understood that people who never get a break eventually become people who burn things down. Some historians believe Saturnalia directly inspired Christmas traditions. Rome has been gone for 1,500 years, and it's still influencing your December. The Floralia. Every spring, Rome held a festival for Flora, goddess of flowers and youth. It lasted 6 days. There were theatrical performances, circus games, and at some point, historians are very calm about this, nudity became involved. The crowd at the theater could apparently demand it, and the performers obliged. Rome didn't just celebrate spring. It celebrated spring aggressively. Flowers were thrown everywhere. People wore bright, colorful clothes instead of the usual white togas. The whole city looked like it collectively decided that winter had gone on long enough and everyone needed to act out. The FETIALES. Rome could not legally go to war without performing the ritual of the FETIALES first. A college of 20 priests handled all of Rome's formal declarations of war and peace. Before attacking anyone, a FETIALES priest traveled to the enemy's border, recited a formal complaint out loud, waited 33 days, and then hurled a spear into enemy territory to officially begin hostilities. Rome was the most militaristic civilization in the ancient world, and it required paperwork before every single war. As Rome expanded, enemy borders got too far away to travel to. Rome's solution? They designated a small plot of land near the Temple of Bellona as symbolic enemy territory. A priest would throw the spear there instead. The ROBIGALIA. Every April 25th, Rome held a ritual specifically to stop wheat rust, a fungal disease that could destroy the entire harvest. A priest walked the city boundary in a solemn procession, then sacrificed a dog and a sheep to the god Robigus, begging him not to infect the crops. A dog. For the wheat. Rome had a god specifically for crop fungus, which means someone at some point said, we need a deity for this specific agricultural problem, and everyone agreed that was a completely normal thing to need. Rome's relationship with its food supply was so anxious, it basically scheduled an annual panic attack and called it religion. The AMBARVALIA. This ritual involved a farmer, or Rome's priests, walking 3 times around an entire field with sacrificial animals before the harvest. 3 full laps around the whole field with animals. The procession purified the land, blessed the crops, and appeased Ceres, goddess of grain. The prayer recited during the AMBARVALIA asked Ceres to protect the crops, the farmers, the workers, the land, and then the farmers again, just to be safe. Asking twice was not considered excessive. Rome's agricultural religion operated on the same principle as checking whether you locked the door. You already know you did it, but you do it again anyway because the stakes are too high. The COMPITALIA. At every crossroads in Rome and across the empire, there was a small shrine to the guardian spirits of the neighborhood. Once a year, the COMPITALIA festival honored these spirits with offerings and small theatrical performances right there at the intersection. The whole neighborhood participated. Slaves were given a temporary suspension of their status for the day. It was Rome's version of a block party, except the block party had theological significance and a dedicated priesthood. Rome essentially built a religion into the urban layout so that you couldn't go buy bread without passing 3 sacred sites. The gods were everywhere, and Rome made sure the city reminded you of that at every turn. The Evocatio, when Rome besieged an enemy city and really wanted to win, priests performed a ritual called the Evocatio, formally inviting the enemy city's patron god to abandon the city and come live in Rome instead. They promised the deity a better temple, more worshippers, and superior offerings. Rome was essentially trying to poach other cities' gods with a better compensation package. The terrifying part? Romans believed it worked. After the conquest of Veii, they credited the victory to successfully convincing Juno to switch sides. Rome didn't just conquer your land and your people. The empire ran on military might, political genius, and apparently divine headhunting.